Hari Om
I'm just gonna-
Srimukti.
Hari Om on this beautiful morning.
It is a beautiful morning, and more beautiful to see your face and to be here with you today. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for joining me. Today I wanted to really continue to the discussion that we had a few months ago on the Yoga Upanishads, the great body of work that was started by our much-loved friend Swami Satyadharma, who really began this project to develop their English commentary, because there have been none so far. And you really were her right hand with that and helping to produce that work. So it's really an honor to be here with you today and to see that the project is alive and well and continues. So thank you.
And thank you for continuing those teachings as well in a very sincere and committed way.
I think that inspiration from Swami Satyadharma has really been instilled in both of us. So it's lovely we can come together and continue in that spirit. So I'm your biggest supporter.
Oh, thank you. I need it. I need you.
And so in our last discussion, we really took a look at the Yoga Upanishads in the bigger context and that era where the essence of Tantra and the Vedantic thought were really synthesized together, and this very evolved system of yoga came forward that has been contained in the texts, which are full of riddle and allegory and myth and esoteric teachings, and how inspired Swami Satyadharma was to preserve them for the future. And today I wanted to really start to take a closer look at the first Yoga Upanishad that was produced, the Yoga Chudamani, with you, and to just get into a little bit of that text. And before we do that, I always feel it's really helpful for people watching to just paint a little bit of the picture of how these teachings came forth. And often we find that in the word itself. So if we look at Yoga Upanishad, we can say very simply that yoga means to yoke the individual consciousness and energy with the universal. And Upanishad really means to sit close to the teachings. And so that paints the picture that, you know, in this era, the Enlightened Sage, the teacher, would come out of the forest and that state of very deep consciousness and begin to share the teachings with the disciples and the students that would sit very close to that sage, who were very close to enlightenment themselves, and that teaching would unfold and be shared orally and started to be recorded in the text. So can I begin by asking you, who was this enlightened sage and how did he or she begin that teaching, that invocation?
Well, in this one, the sage's name is not mentioned, and that's because his main purpose, he's an enlightened person and giving the teachings not for his own benefit, but for the sole benefit of the most dedicated yoga aspirants. Yeah. So the name of the person is not really necessary, but we can just assume that he was an enlightened sage or he wouldn't have been able to give the teachings. Yeah.
And
what was the other part of the question? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm aware that all of these ancient texts do start with an invocation. an offering to the students, to the benevolent forces. Sometimes we become familiar with these mantras ourselves, but we don't know where they've come from. So I'm wondering how this beautiful sage started the text, started the teaching.
Oh, okay. Well, it begins, the invocation is the aspirant requesting that his or her body and senses be pure and strong in order to apply the teachings. And as all the teachings come from Brahma, he asks, the supreme reality from which everything comes from. He asks that he not be abandoned by Brahma and that he always remain immersed in Brahma. That means in the higher qualities, in the higher consciousness, so that he can fully absorb the teachings of the Upanishad. And all invocations include with Om Shanti, which is the peace of Om, which cannot be disturbed by external circumstances.
And is this particular text, the Yoga Chudamani, maybe you can share what that means, Chudamani, as well, and then just elaborate. I know that some of the Yoga Upanishads have a lot of verses, some are quite short, some are in prose. How is this text laid out?
Well, Chudamani means the crown jewel. So Umani means the jewel and Chuda means the crown. So that can have two meanings. Chuda is as crown can be the peak of the teachings, the highest teachings, and also refers to Sahasrara chakra, the last chakra, which is beyond the individual self and through which the cosmic consciousness has come. And this text is all in verse. There are 121 verses, and it gives an outline of the 6 limbs of yoga. So that the two, starting with the first 2 limbs, are the outer limbs, the asana, the steady position, meditative position, and pranayama, the breathing practices or expansion of prana. And those 2 are preparing for the next 4. The inner stages. So the first of the inner stages is pratyahara. So when you're actually used to going through these stages, you don't think, oh, now I've got to do pranayama after your asana, now I've got to do pranayama, now I've got to do pratyahara. They actually flow into each other. You don't have. So pratyahara is the withdrawal of the senses, or disassociating with the sense from the senses, the outer senses from the outer world, and the inner senses, sort of whatever thoughts, you might have thoughts coming and going, but you're not attached to them. Like the old, very good example, often used to just see them as clouds moving over a clear blue sky. So then from pratyahara we go into dharana, concentration. So it's very important to have something, an image to concentrate on. Often that is an image given by the guru, if you have one, or it can be anything symbolizing a higher consciousness. So people often use a light, something in the form of a light, because that's where we're going towards We're going towards the light.
Yes. Invoking
clarity.
positive, luminous
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
And then after
So
dharana,
then that will naturally lead into
yeah.
dhyana, a deep meditation. So that's, unity with the pure consciousness.
Mm.
And then sorry, that's the meditation. You're actually in the deep meditation. You're not thinking of anything else. And it's often something that can't really be described unless you're in that state. Because it's like when you're, it might even be late at night and you might be feeling tired, just want to sleep. But then once you go through those stages and you get into that meditative state, then you find you can stay in there for quite a long time. And then you look at your watch, it's 2:00 in the morning. Oh, how did I get there? Anyway, and then from there, hopefully you go into the last one is Samadhi, which is the unity with pure consciousness.
Yeah. And like you said, it's sort of creating the atmosphere, coming to a certain platform, and then all of the faculties start to flow, from the very subtle to the more gross parts of the mind start to really flow to a point. And then there's that absorption in the point, and then that transcendence in a way where there is no flow and point. There's that non-dual experience. So it sounds so easy, doesn't it? So systematic.
Well, yeah, a lot of things that sound simple actually are quite difficult, unless it's like training for a marathon. I mean, I know sometimes beginners think, oh, you just do this, that, and you get into it. But would they say that if they were training for a marathon? You've got to go step by step, very gradually, and do it every day.
That's right. The conditioning, yoga is sort of the conditioning, isn't it? And particularly when we move into these stages of dharana, and we start to see just how much is contained in the psyche and the mind, and a real purification and release that's required for that, the faculties of the mind to actually come to the point and absorb. So very systematic, but very, very big, very big. And so it's really...
that concentration, can I just add a little bit about dharana?
Please.
Is even if it's not a light, can be anything, something or somebody maybe that you love, and you're just seeing, when you mentioned the gross, going from gross to subtle, it just reminded me, you're seeing the gross form of that person or animal or part of nature. And then as you concentrate on it more and more, you can actually see or be aware of the subtle energies that are flowing through it. And which become more and more subtle. And then until you get the cause of those subtle energies.
Yes.
The cause is giving rise to the subtle energy, the prana, and then that gives rise to the form.
And this really, these really are the three domains, I suppose, in the whole manifest experience. And I guess, you're such a profound Sanskrit scholar as well. And so it reminds me of the Sanskrit language itself. Often these names and terms contain those three levels, you know, the physical, the subtle, the causal as well. So we always find in the texts, you know, you can read it and be attuning to one particular level, or, you know, moving through them, or all at once. You can keep coming back and opening the knowledge that's contained. So we can say that this text is really looking at those 6 limbs, would you say, is the main essence and teaching of this text, the Yoga Chudamani?
Yeah, it's giving, that's right, giving a pathway, you know, step by step that somebody can follow to get to that realization that the rishis of the Vedas had.
And
the method to get there.
Yeah, and the practices themselves is the main aspect of this text, is the practices themselves for these stages?
Oh yeah, that's right. They're all supports, these practices, all supports to get up. Who was it? Someone said about the path to culmination of yoga is a razor edge path, and all these practices.
Hi, Victor.
Don't forget me to give me some sharing screen.
Yeah, sharing. All these practices are like, you know, like little handrails or walking sticks or whatever to keep you on that path and help you up the path so you don't lag behind or give up. So some of the practice, because most of the book also is a treatise on kundalini yoga, which is raising the Shakti energy. Shakti is the more subtle form of prana. So the cosmic consciousness, also known as Shiva, gives rise to Shakti, the very subtle energy. And then she goes down through the chakras, and then, having done all that work, has a nice rest, coiled up like a snake at our base chakra, Muladhara.
And we dream this life.
Yeah. She's thinking, oh, I've done all that, now I can have a rest. But we don't want to let her rest, because we want to reach the cosmic consciousness. And so we have to so in the body, as you know, there are 72,000 nadis. These are the channels of energy. Forget about the 71,997. We'll just concentrate on these 3 main ones, which are sushumna, which is the spinal energy, goes straight up the spine. And then the other 2 on each side are ida for the left side, the left nadi, and pingala, the right nadi.
The chit
so
shakti,
in our
prana shakti.
Pardon?
Yeah, which we come to know as the chit shakti for Ida, the mental gives rise to the mental manifestation, and the prana shakti, that more vital energy. Yeah.
And if you're very observant, you can notice yourself during the day which one is operating more fully. So, you know, say you're involved in a very introverted task, such as, I don't know, painting or whatever, and you might notice you can check your nostrils, and you might notice that the left breath is stronger than the right one. And similarly, if you're in a very extroverted activity, you'll notice that the right one is flowing more strongly.
Mm.
So we want a balance. We need to get a balance of these two. And the nadis need to be purified in order for the prana to flow, not just occasionally, but all the time up sushumna, up that central channel.
Which we do sometimes experience that spontaneously, where there is that balance, and often there are those moments where you do feel that expansion, or you really feel inspired to meditate. And talking about the chit shakti of Ida and the pingala, the pranic shakti, and then with sushumna, it's really the atma shakti, or the energy of the spirit.
Right.
So harmonizing, because we're always under sway, like you said, with the daily activity. And not only do the practices help to balance and purify, but we have to sensitize too, so that we're not having to check our breath. We can really just see which one is starting to put the other out of balance a bit. And I think we do naturally do that. We're just not so aware of the subtlety. So if we've been very mental, we have that feeling like, wow, I really need to go for a walk or get in the garden, or we are inclined to balance our active life, but the practices really start to sensitize us to the energy, and behind that the shakti, what you mentioned, the more subtle. And actually I wanted to while we're talking about the flows, it reminds me of the practice nadi shodana, which is contained in the text. And I wanted to ask you and to mention, because we're talking about some of these concepts that are probably quite familiar to people watching. And even if we talk about the practice of nadi shodana, many people know that practice, do that practice, have learnt it with a teacher. But the subtlety that's contained in these teachings is something quite beyond what people may have come into contact with, even long-term teachers. And I actually wanted to just read a very short part from one of the Yoga Upanishad texts related to nadi shodana, and of course you'll be familiar with it, but just to let people hear some of that subtlety, if that's okay. Would you mind?
Yeah, that's sure. Love to hear it. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so this is for the practice of nadi shodana, so the alternate nostril breathing, which starts off physical and we become sensitized. But in these ancient times, one should begin the practice by sitting quietly until the body becomes steady and still. At this point, one should focus the mind on the breathing at the nose tip. As the breathing becomes slow and rhythmic, one should simultaneously direct the inner gaze towards Bindu Visarga, the psychic center at the top back of the head. Here one should perceive the flow of Amrita, the nectar of life, falling from the crescent moon at Bindu with one's own inner eye. The flow of nectar from the crescent moon has also been termed Turiya. Here Turiya means the transcendental consciousness, which is the source of nectar which flows down into the body from the crescent moon at Bindu. Focusing on the nose tip to stimulate Muladhara chakra, one should perceive Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness, beyond the three states of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. This is the preparation. Maintain awareness at this point of Bindu. Bindu is in Anandamaya Kosha, and that is the source where everything manifests and dissolves back into. Having completed the preparation, one should perform nadi shodana pranayama for the purification of the nadis. Slowly inhale through the left nostril and draw the prana down through Ida nadi, filling the belly. Retaining the breath inside, one should meditate on the fire arising from the flames at the center of Manipur chakra, the navel center. At the same time, one should reflect on the bija mantra of fire, which is the sound ram, along with the bija mantra of bindu, which is the sound om. Next, the prana should be exhaled slowly and completely from the right nostril through pingala nadi. At the end of exhalation, one should inhale from the right nostril through pingala nadi, filling the belly, and again reflecting on the fire at Manipur and the bija mantras ram and om. And on it goes and on it goes. So we can see the subtlety.
That's really
we're starting from Turiya.
Yeah, because most texts don't give all that detail about, especially about meditating on bindu, which is a really good visualization to do while you're doing the practice. Yeah.
And so
another thing with having all these in a book, which Upanishad did you say that one is from?
This one was from Yoga Darshan, actually, but just while you were talking about Nadi Shodan. So we'll get to Yoga Darshan. We'll get to Yoga Darshan next time.
But what was I going to say? Yeah, even though it's good to have those books as reference, even though you might have been practicing for a long time and you go regularly to your weekly class. In a weekly class, usually it's not more than 10 or 15 minutes doing this pranayama. And the teacher might not have time to explain all these details, or even if she or he does, you'd forget them, So they're all reminders in the texts. And also there are so many levels with Nadi Shodana.
So many levels.
Yeah, there's the early stages, which anybody can do, and just finishes with increasing the exhalation, doubling it to the inhalation. And then there's the later stages, continuing stages where the internal and then external breath retention, kumbhaka, are introduced very slowly, gradually, and also bandhas. And then there are later stages where, you're having longer exhalations, longer times of breath retention in and out. But it's very much stressed that you go through these stages very gradually and not force the breath. And I've found, because I had yoga classes for many years, to get people to start off just with breath awareness for a long time. I mean, a lot of people, we're not, who've never done yoga or other things where you use the breath, where you have to be conscious of the breath. A lot of people, we've got the breath. If we didn't have the breath, we'd be dead, and that's it. But they're not aware at all of the movement of the breath, the rhythm of the breath, the temperature of the breath, the effect of your breath on the mind and body, and so on. So I think spending a long time on breath awareness is good. And then another preparatory practice is viloma. Full yogic breathing, where you get used to deepening your inhalations. And also viloma, also we're starting to get used to the inner attention.
I think for, most teachers, most people, the pranayama is still really very much in a physical and mental level, with the sensitizing to the energies of Ida and Pingala, and following through those processes. It's still very much at the beginning. And so when you read these texts, although I am often inspired to commence my 3 hours of pranayama every night, just like you do, Srimukti, hours of
mine was yoga nidra. Every night. Yeah.
But what I find is that it's just so inspiring to expand into the possibility of this subtlety. And we may not be conditioned and in a lifestyle that really supports such a deep level of committed practice that is contained in the text. But more and more that I come close to these texts, I do find that there are these subtleties and the possibility of the subtleties that do come into wherever it is I am in the practices myself. So I would say for people that are interested now to get the text, that it really is very inspiring, very beautiful, very subtle. And whether you're able to have that perception or not, or that commitment or not, it's still a very wonderful way to have a glimpse into the quality of the students, the subtle quality of the students and the teacher, and this ancient, profound practices that were very present, that were very natural because of that expanded consciousness that was prevalent with them at this time. And that really comes through the texts, and it stays with you. It stays with you. And so to suddenly have these other fields of subtlety coming into what you're already doing is a great gift. And I feel that comes through the text, and it's one of the reasons I'm so supportive of them. I can see how they have affected my own awareness in my own sadhana as well. So
and also it's very inspiring that you even if you say you have a busy schedule, you know that one day you'll be able to deepen the practice. But another thing I wanted to say about this is that it's more important to be regular really than to do a lot of practices. So say, I don't know, even 15 minutes a day is more beneficial. It becomes more part of you than say 7 hours once a fortnight or something.
Absolutely.
Like that. Because it's really like you're digesting these experiences. They're becoming part of you. It's just like you wouldn't have, fast for 2 weeks and then eat all day. It's the same, if I can use that analogy. And another inspiring thing is that once you've met people and got to know people who have done this, followed a yogic path for a long time and made it part of their life, like Swami Satyadharma, that's also an inspiration to carry forward.
Coming to, I suppose it is one of the hardest things for people to maintain, is just having that regular practice and finding what it is for you that you can do every day without fail, even if it's 10 minutes of meditation a night, because it really creates a very stable foundation and begins that conditioning. And I think when it comes to these subtleties, I find that, when you're coming together in a group in the right atmosphere and learning really properly, really systematically, then that window is sort of open for us. I've experienced that many times, that window to attune to that more subtle can come in the right setting with the right teacher, the right group. So that's also very, very helpful when it comes to extending beyond your current state of awareness. So it's been a a great pleasure to be able to develop some and share some of these practices over the last year. A great gift.
Right.
So, Yoga Chudamani, is there anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to share about this text, Srimukti?
Well, just very briefly, because each of these aspects really could, we could talk about them for half an hour each. So maybe I'll just give a brief summary of what else is in the text, and then we can talk about them in later videos, if you like. So we've talked about the subtle body, the sushumna, ida, and pingala, and then there's the chakras, of course, which the nadis go through, and then there are the gunas, the qualities of nature, and the 5 koshas, which are the dimensions of human experience. And then the 3 akashas, which are the spaces or etheric planes. And the bindu, you've been talking about that, the point between the manifest and the unmanifest. That is a great place to meditate on, to focus on when you're doing your nadi shodana practices. And Om, of course, pranava. So
yeah, the nad.
And the text, all apart from pranayama and the asana, the text also gives the practices of mudra and bandha. Yeah.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we were going a little into the practical, but it's another thing to highlight with these texts is, it's really giving the systematic teachings and practices from this time, from this era. And of course, contained in that is the whole totality, the whole spectrum, like you mentioned, from the unmanifest right through to the manifest, drawing on all of those deep subjects that we've come into contact with, and just scratching the surface, like the gunas and the tattvas and the nad, and all of those beautiful bits you just mentioned. And what it really offers is a totality, a completion. If one was to really just use that text alone, everything is contained. It's a total system, total knowledge that it's really like a vidya in a way, and vidya means an inner knowledge, a knowledge that is within us, and through the practices themselves we're able to come to that knowledge through the expansion, through the liberation, that a knowledge awakens. And so it's that beautiful reminder that all the theory and wonderful knowledge can come through the intellect, but without the system, without the practice, we can't really realize that, because the point is to realize that, not to talk and write about it, although that's helpful, but to realize that through the system, through the practice, that the ancients preserved just for this, just for us. So
actually talking a very good saying, I think it was Sri Aurobindo who said, the intellect is the way, the intellect is the barrier, transcend the intellect. So that's when it becomes the intuition, and then when at a later recording we'll talk about the koshas, where there's the intellectual dimension, the mental dimension, and then there's also a higher level, the intuitive dimension.
Yes. And you see, we do have to satisfy the mind, the intellectual mind first, you know, to befriend it and have it on our side.
Yeah.
We've had someone else join our meeting now, because I think I'm rolling into the next meeting, Srimukti. So
I'll
leave you. I'll happily leave you for 10 minutes.
We've just had, okay, thanks, Ananda Jyoti.
I'll happily leave you. Don't worry.
Okay.
I was just setting up.
Okay.
So we actually have a little kirtan session with the Canberra group that happens at 11. So that's Ananda Jyoti, a wonderful teacher in Canberra with a beautiful centre that I've been sharing at. So she's just a little early here. So probably a good place to leave. But I really look forward to joining you again, and perhaps moving into the next Yoga Upanishad, the Yoga Tattva, or maybe we have some more to talk about Yoga Chudamani. So thank you so much, Srimukti.
So thank you. Thank you. Hari Om. Thank you.
Hari Om.